Elena Vasquez rubbed her lower back as she pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway of the Grand Rivera Hotel. 20 years of scrubbing, bathrooms and changing sheets had left her with permanent aches that no amount of cheap pain pills could fix. But today was payday, and that thought kept her going through the morning shift. The hotel was busier than usual because of the music festival in town. Famous musicians and their fans filled the rooms, leaving bigger messes and occasionally better tips. Elena had learned to become invisible around these guests. Eyes down, silent work, quick exits. It was easier that way. As she approached the end of the hallway, Elena heard piano music coming from the hotel's main lounge. She slowed her steps, drawn to the sound like a moth to flame. The melody was complex but played with such ease that it could only be someone who had spent a lifetime mastering the instrument. Despite her growing list of rooms to clean, Elena found herself pushing her cart to the side and walking toward the music. The Grand Rivera's lounge was the crown jewel of the hotel. High ceilings with crystal chandeliers, plush velvet seats, and in the center, a stunning black grand piano. Normally, Elena only entered this room in the early morning hours to vacuum and dust before guests woke up. Now, in the middle of the day, she felt out of place in her gray uniform among the well-dressed hotel guests. She stood in the doorway, hoping no one would notice her. At the piano sat a man whose face Elena recognized from posters all over town. Victor Roth, the celebrated pianist whose sold-out concert was the talk of the city. His fingers danced across the keys with such precision and speed that they almost blurred. Around him gathered about a dozen people, some holding champagne glasses, all dressed in expensive clothes that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. Elena didn't mean to stare, but she couldn't help herself. It had been so long since she'd been this close to a piano being played by a master. Something inside her chest ached with a familiar longing she had spent years trying to forget. And that, Victor announced as he finished with a flourish, is just a small preview of tonight's performance. His accent was European, maybe German or Austrian, Elena wasn't sure. The small crowd around him applauded enthusiastically. "Victor, you're being too modest," said a woman in a red dress, touching his shoulder. "Tell them about the standing ovation in Vienna last month." Victor laughed and ran a hand through his perfectly styled gray hair. "Well, what can I say? When you play Rachmaninoff the way it's meant to be played, people tend to get emotional." Elena didn't realize she had stepped further into the room until her hip bumped against a small table, causing an empty glass to wobble. The small noise shouldn't have been noticeable over the chatter, but somehow at that exact moment the conversation had lulled. Victor Roth's eyes locked with hers. Elena immediately looked down at her worn shoes, her face burning with embarrassment. "Can I help you?" Victor asked, his voice carrying across the room. Everyone turned to look at her. "I'm sorry," Elena mumbled, already backing away. "I was just passing by. I didn't mean to interrupt." "Are you a fan?" Victor asked, a slight smirk playing on his lips. His friends exchanged glances, some of them smiling in a way that made Elena's stomach tighten. I like piano music," she said, wishing she could disappear. 20 years ago, she would have had a different answer. "Do you play?" Victor asked, gesturing to the piano. There was something challenging in his tone, as if he already knew the answer would be no. Before Elena could respond, one of the men in the group chuckled. "Victor, don't tease the cleaning lady. I'm sure she's very busy. Elena should have left then." She should have nodded, apologized again, and gone back to her cart to continue her day as if nothing had happened. That would have been the sensible thing to do. But something about the way they were looking at her, with amusement, with dismissal, stirred something that had been dormant for too long. "I used to," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Used to? Piano isn't like riding a bicycle, you know. You can't just pick it up again after years away." His friends laughed, and Elena felt heat rising in her face for a different reason now. Victor seemed to enjoy the moment. With an exaggerated gesture, he stood up from the piano bench and motioned toward it. "Please, by all means, show us what you can do." Elena stood frozen. This wasn't why she had stopped to listen. She hadn't touched a piano in almost 2 decades. Her hands were rough now, the nails cut short for cleaning, the skin dried out from harsh chemicals. "I don't think that's," she started to say. "Oh, come on," Victor insisted, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Just one little tune. Anything you like. Chopsticks, perhaps? Or Heart and Soul?" More laughter from his entourage. Elena glanced toward the door, calculating her escape. But she also looked at the piano, gleaming, beautiful, and suddenly unbearably tempting. How many nights had she dreamed of sitting at such an instrument again? "Unless you're afraid," Victor added, the challenge clear in his voice. Elena thought about her supervisor, who would certainly be looking for her by now. She thought about her rent due next week and how she couldn't afford to lose this job. She thought about her small apartment where she hummed melodies to herself while cooking dinner, her fingers sometimes tapping out rhythms on the kitchen counter as if it were a keyboard. Then, almost as if her body was making the decision for her, Elena found herself walking toward the piano. "Oh, she's actually going to do it," someone whispered loudly enough for Elena to hear. Victor stepped aside with an exaggerated bow, gesturing to the bench like a ringmaster inviting the main attraction into the circus ring. His friends gathered closer, not wanting to miss what promised to be an amusing spectacle. The piano bench felt cool and smooth as Elena sat down, adjusting her position out of habit. The keys before her, ivory and ebony perfectly maintained, seemed to welcome her like old friends. She placed her hands in her lap first, suddenly aware of how they looked, small but strong, with calluses that told the story of her life now, not the life she once thought she'd have. "We're waiting," Victor said, a hint of impatience in his voice. He had expected her to back down, Elena realized. He never thought she would actually sit at his piano. Elena took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. The cool, smooth touch sent a shiver through her body, awakening memories she had tried so hard to bury. For a moment she was 18 again, sitting at a different piano, her future bright with possibilities. She began with a simple C major chord, just to feel the instrument respond to her touch. The sound resonated through the lounge, clear and true. Elena closed her eyes, letting her fingers remember what her mind had tried to forget. What happened next surprised even her. Her hands began to move across the keys, tentatively at first, playing the beginning of a piece she had written herself long ago, before life had taken its unexpected turns. It was rusty, imperfect, her timing was off, and she missed a few notes, but it was unmistakably music. The smiles faded from the faces of Victor's friends. Victor himself stood with his champagne glass halfway to his lips, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion. Elena barely noticed them now. The world had narrowed to just her and the piano. As her confidence grew, so did the complexity of her playing. The piece evolved from its simple beginning into something richer, deeper, a melody that spoke of lost dreams and quiet resilience, of beauty found in unexpected places. A hotel guest walking through the lobby paused at the entrance to the lounge, drawn by the music. Then another stopped. A small crowd began to gather, curious about the woman in the cleaner's uniform playing with such unexpected feeling. Victor watched, his initial joke now forgotten as Elena played with her eyes closed, swaying slightly with the music. There was no technical perfection in her performance. Years without practice had taken that away. But there was something else, something that even Victor, with all his training and acclaim, sometimes struggled to achieve in his own playing: raw, honest emotion. The melody she played seemed to come from somewhere deep within her, telling a story without words, of dreams deferred but not forgotten, of beauty existing alongside struggle. It was the sound of someone who had lived a life very different from the one they had planned, yet had never completely let go of who they once were. As Elena approached the end of her improvised piece, she opened her eyes, almost startled to find herself in the hotel lounge rather than in her memories. She played the final notes softly, letting them linger in the air before slowly lifting her hands from the keys. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then from the small crowd that had gathered, someone began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound growing until it filled the lounge. Elena stood quickly, her face flushed with emotion. She looked at Victor, whose expression had transformed from mocking amusement to something much more complex. Surprise, certainly, but also a hint of shame mixed with genuine admiration. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked, his voice lacking its earlier condescension. Elena smoothed down her uniform with trembling hands. "A long time ago," she said simply, "in another life." Before anyone could ask more questions, Elena's supervisor appeared at the entrance to the lounge, her face tight with disapproval. "Elena, what are you doing? There are rooms waiting to be cleaned on the 4th floor." Reality came rushing back. Elena nodded quickly, murmured an apology to no one in particular, and hurried toward the door, avoiding the curious stares of the guests who had stopped to listen. As she pushed her cleaning cart toward the service elevator, her heart was racing. Her hands, which had just created music that moved strangers to applause, now returned to their familiar work of gripping mop handles and folding sheets. But something had changed. Something had awakened that wouldn't easily go back to sleep. And behind her, in the lounge, Victor Roth sat back down at the piano, his fingers hovering over the keys as he tried to recapture the haunting melody that the cleaning woman had played. A melody that, despite his years of classical training, he couldn't quite reproduce. Elena couldn't focus on her work for the rest of the day. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions of changing sheets and scrubbing bathrooms. But her mind kept returning to those few minutes at the piano. The feeling of the keys beneath her fingers, the sound filling the room, the looks on people's faces. It was as if a door she had locked long ago had suddenly been forced open. By the time her shift ended, rumors had spread throughout the hotel staff. A young bellhop stopped her in the service hallway. "Is it true?" he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "Did you really play piano in front of Victor Roth?" Elena shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "It wasn't a big deal. I just played a little something." But Mia from the front desk said people were crying. She said even Mr. Roth looked shocked. Elena shook her head and pushed past him gently. "People exaggerate," she said, though she remembered the expressions on the faces in the crowd, the surprise, the emotion. Had someone actually cried? She hadn't noticed, too lost in her own world of rediscovered music. Outside, the evening air was cool against her skin. Elena pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders and began the long walk to the bus stop. Her apartment was on the other side of town, a 45-minute ride when traffic was good. Tonight, she didn't mind the journey. She needed time to think. As she waited for the bus, her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter, Lucia, who was away at college on a hard-won scholarship. "Mom, is this you?" Below the message was a link to a video. Elena's heart sank as she clicked on it. The screen filled with a slightly shaky recording of her playing the piano at the hotel. Whoever had filmed it had been standing near the entrance to the lounge, capturing her from the side, her face partly visible as she swayed with the music. The video already had several thousand views and hundreds of comments. Elena scrolled through some of them with growing disbelief. Who is she? That cleaning lady plays with more soul than most professionals. Does anyone know what piece this is? It's beautiful. Someone find her and give her a recording contract. The bus arrived and Elena climbed aboard, finding a seat at the back where she could continue watching the video in private. She put in her earbuds and listened to herself play, hearing her music from an outsider's perspective for the first time. It wasn't perfect. She could hear the mistakes, the places where her lack of practice showed. But there was something in it that even she couldn't deny. A raw, honest quality that seemed to reach through the screen and touch something deep inside. The comments continued to roll in as she watched, people from all over sharing how the music made them feel. One comment in particular caught her eye. "This reminds me of my mother. She used to play for us before she got sick. I haven't heard piano that made me feel this way since she died. Thank you, whoever you are." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined her playing could affect strangers this way. For 20 years, music had been a private grief for her, a dream she had set aside out of necessity. Now suddenly it was public, a gift she had unknowingly given to others. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Lucia. "Mom, call me." Elena got off at her stop and walked the 3 blocks to her apartment building, an old structure with peeling paint and unreliable heating, but the best she could afford as a single mother, who had spent years putting every spare penny toward her daughter's education. Inside her small 1-bedroom apartment, she kicked off her shoes, sat on the edge of her bed, and called Lucia. "Mom." Lucia's voice was bursting with excitement. "That video of you is going viral. My roommate showed it to me. She didn't even know it was you until I recognized you. Why didn't you tell me you were playing again?" "I'm not playing again," Elena said, the reality of her situation settling back in. "It was just a weird moment. This famous pianist was making fun of me, and I don't know why, but I decided to show him I could actually play." "Making fun of you? What a jerk. But Mom, you were amazing. I forgot how good you were. I was so little when you used to play." Elena smiled sadly. Lucia had been only 5 when Elena had sold their old upright piano to pay for rent, after Elena's mother got sick and needed full-time care. Lucia probably barely remembered the days when Elena would play in the evenings, making up songs while Lucia danced around their small living room. It was a long time ago, Elena said softly. But you could start again. People love the video. There are comments asking who you are if you have other recordings. Lucia, I'm a hotel cleaner with a bad back and hands that smell like cleaning products. That part of my life is over. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Lucia said, the woman in that video doesn't look like someone whose dream is over. Mom, she looks like someone who just woke up. After they hung up, Elena sat in the quiet of her apartment, Lucia's words echoing in her mind. On an impulse, she cleared off the small table where she ate her meals and sat down in front of it. She placed her hands on the surface, feeling its smoothness beneath her fingers. So different from the piano keys, but still a surface she could pretend with. She closed her eyes and began to move her fingers, playing an invisible piano, hearing the music in her head. The melody she had played at the hotel came back to her, but now it evolved, developing in new directions as if it had been waiting all these years to continue growing. Elena was so absorbed in her silent playing that she almost didn't hear the knock at her door. Startled, she got up and peered through the peephole, expecting to see her elderly neighbor who sometimes needed help with her medication. Instead, she found herself looking at Victor Roth. Elena's heart jumped into her throat. She considered pretending she wasn't home, but curiosity won out. She opened the door just enough to see him properly. How did you find me? She asked, too surprised for pleasantries. Victor looked different from earlier, less polished, more human somehow. His expensive coat was wrinkled and his hair wasn't as perfectly styled. I asked your supervisor, he said. I can be quite persuasive when I need to be. He paused, looking uncomfortable. May I come in? I'd like to talk to you. Elena hesitated, then opened the door wider, suddenly self-conscious about her small, sparsely furnished apartment. It's not much, she said, gesturing vaguely. Victor stepped inside, his tall figure making the space seem even smaller. He glanced around, taking in the faded curtains, the worn couch, the small table with its single chair. His eyes lingered on a framed photograph of Lucia in her high school graduation gown. Your daughter? He asked. Elena nodded. Lucia. She's in college now, pre-med. You must be proud. Every day. Elena crossed her arms. Mr. Roth, why are you here? Victor took a deep breath. First, to apologize. My behavior this afternoon was inexcusable. I was showing off for my friends and I treated you with disrespect. Elena hadn't expected an apology. She nodded, accepting his words but waiting for the real reason for his visit. And second, he continued, I wanted to ask you about the piece you played. Did you compose it yourself? Yes, Elena admitted. A long time ago. I was just improvising around an old idea. Victor's eyes lit up. It was extraordinary. Raw perhaps, but with a quality that... He trailed off, seeming to search for the right words. Well, to be blunt, it made me feel something. Real emotion. And that's rarer than you might think, even among professionals. Elena didn't know how to respond to that. Where did you study? Victor asked. Your technique shows formal training, even after years without practice. Elena leaned against the wall, memories flooding back. I had a scholarship to the National Conservatory. I completed 2 years before my father died and my mother got sick. I had to come home to take care of her and Lucia. There wasn't money for both my mother's care and my education, so... She shrugged, the old pain still there but dulled by time. Victor's face softened with understanding. And you never went back? Elena gave a short laugh. Life doesn't always give second chances, Mr. Roth. I had a 5-year-old daughter and a mother who needed full-time care. Music became a luxury I couldn't afford. Victor walked over to the small table where Elena had been silently playing just minutes before. He ran his fingers along its surface. And yet, when you sat at that piano today, it was clear that the music never left you. What do you want? Elena asked directly, tired of dancing around whatever purpose had brought him to her door. Victor turned to face her. I want you to play at my concert tomorrow night. Elena stared at him, certain she had misheard. Excuse me? My final piece of the evening is a new composition, a duet. My usual partner had to cancel due to illness. I want you to play it with me. Elena laughed, a genuine burst of disbelief. You can't be serious. I haven't touched a piano in almost 20 years until today. I have no idea how to play your music. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm not exactly concert hall material. She gestured to herself, still in her work uniform. We can rehearse in the morning. The piece isn't technically difficult. It's more about feeling, about conversation between the instruments. And as for appearances, he waved his hand dismissively. That's easily managed. Elena shook her head. This is crazy. You don't even know me. I know enough, Victor said, his voice suddenly earnest. I know that in 5 minutes of playing, you moved people more deeply than many musicians do in an entire concert. I know that you have a gift that shouldn't be wasted cleaning hotel rooms. And I know that I want to share a stage with you, even if it's just for one night. Elena felt dizzy with the impossibility of it all. Why would you do this? Is it guilt? Charity? Victor's expression became serious. Call it atonement if you like, or call it artistic integrity. The truth is, I haven't been moved by music, even my own, in a very long time. Today, listening to you play, I remembered what it felt like when music was more than technique and reputation, when it meant something. Elena looked away, overwhelmed by his words and by the choice before her. On one hand, the idea was absurd. She, a hotel cleaner, playing in a concert hall filled with music critics and wealthy patrons. On the other hand, the thought of sitting at a piano again, a real performance piano, of letting her music be heard. I have work tomorrow, she said weakly. Victor smiled, sensing her resistance crumbling. I've already spoken to the hotel manager. You've been given tomorrow off with pay. You did that before even talking to me? Pretty confident, aren't you? Not confident, Victor said, his smile fading into something more genuine. Hopeful. Elena looked at the photograph of Lucia, thinking of how proud her daughter had sounded on the phone, how excited about the possibility of her mother playing again. She thought about the comments on the video, the people touched by her music, and she thought about herself, the young woman with dreams who had vanished so gradually she hardly noticed until she was gone. One performance, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Just one. Victor's face broke into a wide smile. That's all I'm asking for. Though once people hear you play... He left the thought unfinished, but his meaning was clear. As he turned to leave, Victor paused at the door. There's one more thing. The piece you played today, I'd like you to play it as well. As a solo. But it's not finished, Elena protested. It's just fragments of an old idea. Then finish it, Victor said simply. By tomorrow night. After he left, Elena sat at her small table again, her hands resting on its surface. For the first time in 20 years, she had a deadline, a commission of sorts. For the first time in 20 years, she was, in some small way, a musician again. She began to move her fingers, playing her invisible piano, the melody growing and changing in her mind. Outside her window, the city continued its evening rhythm, unaware that within one of its countless small apartments, a new piece of music was being born, a piece that would, by this time tomorrow, move an entire concert hall to tears. Elena barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, music filled her head. Fragments of melodies, harmonies, and rhythms that had been locked away for years now flowing freely. She got up several times to hum parts into her phone's voice recorder, afraid she might forget them by morning. When dawn finally broke, Elena had been awake for hours, sitting by her window, watching the city slowly come to life. The reality of what she had agreed to do was sinking in, bringing waves of doubt and fear. What had she been thinking? She couldn't perform in front of hundreds of people. She wasn't a musician anymore, hadn't been for decades. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car will pick you up at 8 a.m. for rehearsal. Victor. Elena took a deep breath, fighting the urge to text back and cancel everything. Instead, she got up and opened her closet, pushing aside her work uniforms to find something suitable for a rehearsal. There wasn't much. A pair of black pants that she wore to parent-teacher conferences, a simple blue blouse that Lucia had given her for her birthday 2 years ago. As she dressed, Elena caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than usual. Her hands, though clean, showed years of hard work, not the hands of a concert pianist. She flexed her fingers, wondering if they would remember how to move the way they once did. At precisely 8 a.m., her phone buzzed again. A sleek black car was waiting outside her building. The driver, a young man in a crisp uniform, opened the door for her with a respectful nod. "Good morning, Ms. Vasquez. I'll be taking you to the concert hall." The drive across town was surreal. Elena watched the city pass by through tinted windows, moving from her neighborhood of discount stores and laundromats to the cultural district with its grand buildings and manicured parks. The concert hall came into view, an impressive glass and stone structure that she had passed many times but never entered. Inside, the building was quiet, with only a few staff members preparing for the evening's performance. The driver led her through a maze of hallways to a large rehearsal room where Victor Roth was waiting, seated at a grand piano, papers spread out before him. He looked up when she entered, his face brightening. "Elena, good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Not really," she admitted. Victor laughed. "Neither did I. Too much on my mind." He gestured to the piano. "Shall we begin? We have a lot to do today." Elena approached the instrument cautiously, running her fingers lightly over the polished surface before sitting down. The keys felt different from the hotel piano, more responsive, with a depth of touch that spoke of quality and careful maintenance. "I had them prepare 2 pianos for tonight," Victor explained, gathering his sheet music. "For the duet." Elena nodded, suddenly overwhelmed. "Victor, I need to be honest. I don't read music very well anymore. I mean, I used to, but it's been so long." Victor waved away her concern. "For the duet, I'll guide you through it. As for your solo piece, you won't need sheet music for that, will you? You created it." "I've been working on it, but it's still not finished," Elena said, anxiety creeping into her voice. "The best pieces never are," Victor said with a smile. "They continue to evolve every time they're played." He sat at a second piano across the room. "Now let's begin with some simple exercises to warm up." For the next hour, Victor led Elena through scales and arpeggios, patient as she stumbled occasionally, encouraging when she found her rhythm. Her fingers were stiff at first, but gradually loosened as muscle memory returned. By the time they moved on to the duet, Elena was feeling more confident, though still keenly aware of how much ground she had to make up. Victor's composition was beautiful, a conversation between 2 pianos that moved from questioning phrases to harmonious agreement. He played his part first, showing her the emotional arc of the piece, then walked her through her role measure by measure. "Don't worry about playing every note perfectly," he advised as they worked. "Focus on the feeling, the meaning behind the music. That's what moved people yesterday, not technical perfection, but honest emotion." They took a break for lunch, which was delivered to the rehearsal room, sandwiches and fruit that Elena ate absently, her mind still on the music. "Tell me about your piece," Victor said as they ate. "The one you played yesterday. What inspired it?" Elena considered the question, searching for words to describe something she had never tried to explain before. "It's about paths not taken, I guess. About the life I thought I would have versus the one I actually lived." She paused, picking at her sandwich. "When I was young, music was everything to me. I was going to travel the world, play in famous concert halls, compose pieces that would move people to tears. And then life happened," Victor said softly. Elena nodded. "My father died suddenly, heart attack. My mother couldn't cope alone, and Lucia was just a baby. Someone had to step up, so I came home. Took whatever work I could find. Told myself it was just temporary, just until things got better." She gave a small, sad laugh. 20 years later, I was still telling myself that." Victor was quiet for a moment. "You know, many people would have become bitter, resentful, but I don't hear that in your music." "Oh, I had my bitter years," Elena admitted. "But eventually I realized that anger was only hurting me, not changing anything. And I had Lucia watching her grow, helping her follow her dreams. That gave me purpose." After lunch, they returned to work, running through the duet several times until it began to flow naturally between them. Then Victor stood up from his piano. "Now let's hear your solo piece, whatever you have, even if it's not complete." Elena took a deep breath and positioned her hands over the keys. The melody came to her immediately, starting as it had in the hotel lounge but now developing in new directions. As she played, she felt herself telling her story through the music, the early joy, the sudden loss, the years of struggle, but also moments of unexpected beauty, of love, of quiet triumph. When she finished, Victor was silent, his expression unreadable. "Is it okay?" Elena asked nervously. "It's more than okay." he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. It's extraordinary. You've done what composers strive their whole lives to achieve. You've turned your life into music that speaks directly to the heart. Elena felt herself blush. It still needs work. Don't change too much, Victor cautioned. Sometimes in trying to perfect something, we polish away its soul. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of rehearsal and fine-tuning. A woman from the concert hall staff appeared with several dresses for Elena to try on, settling on a simple, elegant black gown that made her look like a different person entirely. As evening approached, more staff began to arrive and the energy in the building changed. Victor was called away for a sound check, leaving Elena alone in the rehearsal room. She sat at the piano, too nervous now to play, just resting her hands on the silent keys. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lucia. Just landed. Coming straight to the concert hall. So excited! Elena smiled at her phone. Lucia had immediately booked a flight home when Elena told her about Victor's invitation, insisting that nothing could keep her from witnessing this moment. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. An older man in a suit peeked in, his kind face vaguely familiar. Ms. Vasquez? I'm Thomas Chen, the hotel manager. Elena stood up quickly, instinctively straightening her posture as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. Mr. Chen, I'm sorry about yesterday. I know I shouldn't have been in the lounge during my shift. He raised a hand to stop her. Please, that's not why I'm here. I came to wish you luck tonight, and to give you this. He handed her an envelope. Elena opened it curiously. Inside was a check, a large one. What is this for? She asked, confused. It seems the video of you playing in our lounge has gone viral. Over 500,000 views now. Our hotel's name and logo are clearly visible in the background. Mr. Chen smiled. The marketing team calculated what we would have paid for that kind of exposure. Consider it a performance fee. Elena stared at the check, the amount more than she earned in 3 months of cleaning rooms. Thank you, she managed to say. Mr. Chen nodded. Several of our staff will be in the audience tonight. We're all very proud. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Elena? Your job will be waiting for you. Whatever you decide after tonight. But something tells me you might be making a career change soon. After he left, Elena sat back down at the piano, the check still in her hand. 24 hours ago, she had been cleaning bathrooms, invisible to the world. Now she was about to perform in a concert hall, with a check in her hand and her daughter flying in to see her play. The door opened again, and Victor appeared, now dressed in a tailored black suit, his face flushed with pre-performance energy. It's time, he said. They're opening the doors. The hall is already full. Word got out about you and people have been scrambling for tickets all day. Elena felt her heart begin to race, fear threatening to overwhelm her. Victor, I don't think I can do this. There are going to be critics, musicians, people who know immediately that I don't belong on that stage. Victor came and sat beside her on the piano bench. Listen to me. Every person in that audience has a story. Every one of them has known loss, has had to give up dreams, has wondered, what if? Your music speaks to that universal experience. That's why that video touched so many people. But what if I make mistakes? What if I freeze up? Victor smiled. Then you'll be just like every other musician who has ever performed. Including me. He stood and held out his hand. Come. It's time to share your gift with the world. Elena took a deep breath, tucked the check into her evening bag and took his hand. As they walked toward the stage, she could hear the murmur of the audience beyond the curtain, hundreds of people waiting expectantly. I have something to tell you, Victor said as they reached the wings of the stage. After you finish your solo tonight, don't leave the stage. Elena looked at him questioningly. Why? Because I've invited some people to meet you. People who can help you, if you're willing to take another chance on the path not taken. Before Elena could ask what he meant, the stage manager was gesturing to them and Victor was walking out to enthusiastic applause. Elena watched from the side as he bowed and settled at his piano for the first piece of the evening. As the music began to fill the hall, Elena closed her eyes and took another deep breath. For 20 years, she had lived one kind of life. Tonight, perhaps, another kind was beginning. From her place in the wings, Elena watched Victor perform. His technique was flawless, his fingers dancing across the keys with practiced precision. The audience sat in reverent silence, breaking into enthusiastic applause between pieces. Elena's stomach twisted with nerves. These people had paid to see a world-class pianist, not a hotel cleaner who hadn't touched a piano in 2 decades. Victor played 3 solo pieces, each more complex than the last. Then he stood, bowed, and addressed the audience. For my next piece, I have a special surprise. His voice carried effortlessly through the hall. Yesterday, I had an unexpected encounter that reminded me why I became a musician in the first place. Music isn't just about technical skill. It's about connection, emotion, and the human experience. Elena's heart pounded so loudly she was sure people could hear it. I'd like to invite to the stage someone who showed me that a lifetime of training can sometimes matter less than a lifetime of feeling. Please welcome Elena Vasquez. The audience applauded politely, curious murmurs spreading as Elena stepped out onto the stage. The lights were blinding, the sea of faces barely visible. She concentrated on walking steadily in her borrowed heels, keeping her eyes on the piano that waited for her. Victor met her halfway, taking her hand and guiding her to the second piano that had been set up for their duet. As she sat down, he leaned close and whispered, "Just like in rehearsal, it's just you and me playing together, no one else." But it wasn't just them. There were hundreds of people watching, judging. Elena felt frozen, her fingers stiff with fear. Victor gave her an encouraging nod and returned to his own piano. He counted softly, 1, 2, 3, and began to play the opening notes of their duet. Elena's entrance was supposed to come 4 measures in. As Victor's part built toward her entrance, she felt panic rising. She couldn't do this. She couldn't remember the notes, couldn't make her hands move. Victor reached her cue, the music pausing expectantly. Elena sat motionless, terror gripping her. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. In the audience, someone coughed. Victor didn't miss a beat. He simply repeated the introductory measures, giving her another chance at an entrance. As he played, he caught her eye and mouthed, "Breathe." Elena took a deep breath and suddenly remembered why she was there. Not to impress critics or prove anything to anyone, but to make music again after too many silent years. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. Her first few notes were hesitant, but as the familiar pattern emerged, her confidence grew. Victor smiled across at her, his playing adapting subtly to match her tempo. They found a rhythm together, the conversation between their pianos unfolding just as it had in rehearsal. The piece told a story of meeting, parting, searching, and finding. Elena's part asked questions that Victor's answered, then reversed as his music posed questions for her response. As they moved into the middle section, their parts began to intertwine more closely, supporting and enhancing each other. Elena forgot about the audience, forgot about her nerves. She was simply making music with another musician, the way she had dreamed of doing all those years ago. The final section of the duet brought their parts into perfect harmony, the 2 pianos sounding almost like one instrument played by 4 hands. As they struck the final chord together, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the audience erupted into applause, more enthusiastic than polite now. Elena looked up, startled back into awareness of where she was. Victor was standing, gesturing for her to do the same. On shaky legs, she rose and took a small bow. The applause continued as Victor crossed to her piano. "Wonderful," he said quietly. "Now comes your moment. Are you ready?" Elena nodded, though ready was the last thing she felt. Victor turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, Elena will now play an original composition. This piece has never been performed in public before tonight." He squeezed her shoulder lightly and walked off stage, leaving Elena alone in the spotlight. She sat back down at the piano, trying to gather her thoughts. The piece was clear in her mind. She had worked on it all night, all day, but now that the moment had come, doubt crept in again. Elena closed her eyes, shutting out the audience, the concert hall, everything except the music inside her. She thought of her father, who had first sat her at a piano when she was 4 years old. She thought of her mother, who had sacrificed to pay for lessons even when money was tight. She thought of Lucia, somewhere in this very audience now, watching her mother reclaim a long-abandoned dream. She opened her eyes and began to play. The piece started simply, a childlike melody full of hope and possibility. It evolved into something more complex as it went on, occasionally dissonant when it touched on the harder parts of her life, then resolving into moments of unexpected beauty. She played her story, The scholarship, the sudden loss, the difficult choices, the years of quiet sacrifice. But also the joy she had found along the way, the pride in her daughter's accomplishments, the small moments of grace in an ordinary life. As she played the final section, Elena felt tears on her cheeks but made no move to wipe them away. This part of the music spoke of acceptance, of finding peace with the path her life had taken, but also of rediscovery. The feeling of sitting at a piano again after all these years, of being heard. The last notes lingered in the air, soft and questioning, like a door left slightly open. When Elena finally looked up, she saw something she never expected. People in the audience were wiping away tears. Some were simply sitting still, eyes closed as if holding on to the last echoes of the music. Even the critics in the front row, whom she recognized from their photos in the newspaper, seemed moved. The applause began slowly, then built until it filled the hall. Someone near the back stood up, then another person and another, until the entire audience was on their feet. Elena sat stunned as the standing ovation continued. Victor appeared beside her, beaming with pride. He offered his hand, helping her up to take another bow. The applause showed no signs of stopping. "They love you," he said in her ear, "as I knew they would." Elena barely had time to process what was happening before Victor was gesturing to someone off stage. A young woman hurried out, carrying a large bouquet of flowers. Behind her came Lucia, her face glowing with joy and pride. "Mom!" Lucia threw her arms around Elena, nearly knocking her off balance. "That was incredible. I knew you could do it." Elena hugged her daughter tightly, overcome with emotion. "You flew all this way. I wouldn't have missed it for anything," Lucia said. "Do you have any idea how cool it is to discover your mom is a secret piano genius?" Victor cleared his throat, waiting until Elena looked his way. "There are some people I'd like you to meet if you're ready." He led Elena and Lucia off stage, the applause still following them. In a small reception room just off the stage, 3 people were waiting, 2 men and a woman, all dressed formally and wearing expressions of keen interest. "Elena, this is David Harlow from Atlantic Records," Victor said, indicating a tall man with silver hair. "This is Gabriela Ortiz from the New City Music Conservatory, and this is Robert Kim, who runs the Foundation for Musical Renewal." Elena shook their hands automatically, still dazed from the performance and the audience's reaction. "Your playing was remarkable," David Harlow said, "especially considering how long you've been away from music. Victor has told us your story, and we're all interested in being part of what happens next, if you want there to be a next." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, glancing at Victor. Gabriela Ortiz stepped forward. "The conservatory has a program for returning musicians, people who showed promise early in life but had to step away from their studies. We would be honored to offer you a place, and the foundation could provide financial support," Robert Kim added. "A stipend that would allow you to focus on your music without having to worry about making ends meet." David Harlow nodded. "And when you're ready, Atlantic would be very interested in recording your compositions. What you played tonight has commercial potential. It speaks to people in a way that much contemporary classical music doesn't." Elena looked at them all, speechless. Victor had planned this all along, not just a single performance, but a potential new beginning. I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "This is all happening so fast. You don't have to decide anything tonight," Victor assured her. "These are just possibilities to consider." Lucia squeezed her mother's arm. "Mom, this is amazing. It's like the universe is finally giving back everything you had to give up." Elena looked at her daughter, seeing the excitement in her eyes, but also something else. Understanding. For the first time, Lucia was seeing her not just as a mother who had sacrificed for her, but as a woman with her own dreams and talents. "I would need time," Elena said slowly, "to think about it, to practice, to see if I can really do this." "Of course," Gabriela said. "We're not suggesting you jump into a full concert schedule next week. This would be a gradual process at your own pace." Robert Kim handed Elena his card. "The foundation could arrange for a piano to be delivered to your apartment tomorrow, so you can practice while you decide." A piano in her apartment. The thought was almost too much to comprehend. Elena hadn't had a piano in her home since Lucia was a child. "And I should tell you," David Harlow added, "that video of you playing at the hotel has now been viewed over 1 million times. People are already asking where they can hear more of your music." Elena looked at Victor, who had been quietly watching this exchange. Did you know this would happen? When you came to my apartment last night? He shook his head. I hoped something good would come from it, but I had no idea how people would respond to your playing. That was all you, Elena. There was a knock at the door and the stage manager peeked in. Mr. Roth, they're still applauding. They want an encore. Victor raised an eyebrow at Elena. Shall we give them one? The last movement of our duet, perhaps? Elena hesitated, looking at Lucia, at the three strangers offering her a new life, at Victor waiting expectantly. 24 hours ago, she had been invisible, just another worker in a uniform. Now people were applauding for her, waiting for her to play again. She thought of all the nights she had lain awake wondering, what if? What if her father hadn't died? What if she had found a way to continue her studies? What if she had chosen music over responsibility? Now a new what if presented itself. What if she said yes to this unexpected second chance? Let's give them an encore, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. As Victor led her back toward the stage, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. Not regret for a dream abandoned, but anticipation for a dream reborn. 1 year later, Elena sat in a small dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her hair was now styled in a sleek bob, her clothing a simple but elegant black pantsuit, a far cry from the hotel uniform she had worn for so many years. On the table beside her lay a stack of programs for tonight's concert, her name printed in bold letters, Elena Vasquez, New Beginnings. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. 10 minutes. Ms. Vasquez, called the stage manager. Thank you, Elena replied, taking a deep breath to calm the butterflies in her stomach. A year of performances, and she still got nervous before going on stage. Victor had assured her that the feeling never completely went away, even after decades of playing. The day you stop feeling nervous, he had told her, is the day you stop caring. Elena picked up one of the programs and traced her finger over the list of pieces she would play tonight. Most were her own compositions, created during the intense, transformative year that had followed her unexpected debut. The final piece was the one that had started it all, the improvisation she had played at the hotel, now fully developed and titled Hidden Years. So much had changed in 12 months. The day after the concert with Victor, as promised, a beautiful upright piano had been delivered to her tiny apartment. Within a week, with the help of the Foundation for Musical Renewal, she had moved to a larger place with better acoustics and understanding neighbors. Within a month, she had begun taking master classes at the New City Music Conservatory, working with teachers who treated her not as a beginner, but as a colleague finding her way back to a path she had left long ago. Her first recording session had been terrifying. Sitting in the pristine studio at Atlantic Records, surrounded by microphones and watching the producer and engineers behind the glass, Elena had nearly walked out. Only David Harlow's gentle encouragement and Victor's surprise appearance had given her the courage to stay and play. The resulting album, a collection of her original compositions, had been released 3 months ago to critical acclaim. Vasquez brings a rare authenticity to classical piano, one reviewer had written. Her music speaks of real life, not the rarefied existence of traditional composers, but the joys and struggles of ordinary experience, transformed into extraordinary sound. Another knock at the door, softer this time. Mom, can I come in? Elena smiled. Of course, honey. Lucia entered, looking elegant in a deep blue dress, her medical school textbooks temporarily set aside for her mother's concert. She had insisted on being present for every major moment of Elena's new journey, flying in whenever her studies allowed. How are you feeling? Lucia asked, perching on the edge of the dressing table. Nervous, excited, grateful. Elena reached for her daughter's hand. I still can't believe all of this is happening. Lucia squeezed her hand. I can. You were always meant for this, Mom. I just wish it hadn't taken so long for everyone else to see it. Elena shook her head. Everything has its time. If this had happened 20 years ago, I wouldn't be the same musician. I wouldn't have the same stories to tell. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind that only exists between people who truly understand each other. Oh, Lucia said suddenly. I almost forgot. This came for you at the apartment. She handed Elena a small envelope. Elena opened it to find a handwritten note on hotel stationery. Elena. The lounge hasn't been the same without you. Though I mean your music, not your cleaning skills, though those were excellent too. The staff still talks about the day you played. We framed a picture of you at the piano. It's become something of a legend around here. We're all coming to the concert tonight. Front row seats. Break a leg. Mr. Chen and the Grand Rivera staff. Elena smiled, tucking the note into her program. Did I ever tell you that when I was cleaning hotel rooms I used to imagine what it would be like to be a guest instead? To be the person who gets the fancy soap and the turn-down service? Lucia laughed. And now hotels put you up in their best suites when you travel for concerts. Life is strange, Elena agreed. And wonderful. Another knock and the stage manager's voice again. 5 minutes, Ms. Vasquez. Lucia stood and straightened her mother's collar. I should get to my seat. Dad's saving it for me. Elena nodded. Her ex-husband, Lucia's father, had reappeared in their lives after the viral video. Initially just curious about the woman he had once been married to. Their relationship now was cordial, built on the shared pride they felt in their daughter. He's bringing his new wife? Elena asked, and their kids, yes. They're all very excited. The twins think it's cool that their half-sister's mom is famous. Elena rolled her eyes. I'm hardly famous. Your album hit number 3 on the classical charts, Mom. People recognize you on the street. What would you call it? Lucky, Elena said simply. Very, very lucky. After Lucia left, Elena stood and walked to the window of her dressing room. Outside, the city lights sparkled in the early evening darkness. Somewhere out there were all the hotel rooms she had cleaned, the bus stops where she had waited in the rain, the discount stores where she had stretched her paycheck to feed and clothe her daughter. She didn't regret those years. They had shaped her, taught her perseverance, humility, and the value of hard work. They had also given her the material for her music, the authentic emotions that connected with listeners in a way that technical brilliance alone never could. A final knock at the door. It's time, Ms. Vasquez. Elena took one last deep breath and walked out of the dressing room. As she made her way through the backstage area, members of the concert hall staff smiled and nodded respectfully. At the edge of the stage, she paused, listening to the buzz of the audience on the other side of the curtain. A year ago, she had stood in this same spot, terrified of what waited beyond the curtain. Tonight, she felt something different, not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger. Purpose. The stage manager gave her a nod, and Elena walked out into the light. The audience applauded warmly as she crossed to the piano. She took her time settling onto the bench, adjusting its height, feeling the cool keys beneath her fingers. In the front row, she could see Lucia smiling encouragingly. Beside her sat Victor Roth, who had become both mentor and friend. Mr. Chen and a group of hotel staff members were there too, looking slightly out of place but beaming with pride. In the wings stood Gabriela Ortiz from the conservatory, who had helped Elena rebuild her technical skills without losing the emotional rawness that made her playing special. Elena began with a new piece, one she had composed just weeks ago. Titled Second Chances, it spoke of renewal and rediscovery, of doors thought permanently closed suddenly opening again. As she played, she felt that perfect connection between her heart, her hands, and the music, the state that artists in every medium chase their whole lives. The concert moved through her program, each piece telling part of her story. There was Lucia's lullaby, originally hummed to a fussy baby while Elena warmed bottles at 3 a.m. There was Morning Shift, Mom, with its hurried rhythms and brief, unexpected moments of beauty. There was After Hours, a piece that captured the quiet solitude of her apartment after a long day of work, when she would sit by the window and watch the city below. Between pieces, Elena spoke briefly to the audience, explaining the inspirations behind her music in simple, honest terms. She had learned that people connected not just with her playing, but with her story. The authenticity of her journey resonated. In a world often obsessed with overnight success and prodigious youth, for her final piece, Elena paused longer, gathering her thoughts. A little over a year ago, she began. I was cleaning rooms at the Grand Rivera Hotel. I had given up on music decades earlier, or thought I had. But sometimes the dreams we think we've abandoned are just waiting for the right moment to return. She looked out at the audience, seeing not a faceless mass but individuals, each with their own stories of dreams pursued, abandoned, and perhaps waiting to be reclaimed. This piece began as an accident, a moment when I was dared to play a piano by someone who thought I couldn't. She smiled in Victor's direction, and he gave a small self-deprecating bow from his seat. It changed my life. But more importantly, it reminded me that it's never too late to become the person you might have been. Elena turned to the piano and began to play Hidden Years. The piece had evolved since that first impromptu performance, gaining structure and refinement, but it still carried the raw emotion of that moment, the shock of rediscovery, the bittersweet mixture of regret and hope, the sense of a spirit long suppressed finally breaking free. As the final notes faded, Elena kept her hands on the keys, head bowed, allowing herself to feel the full circle of her journey, from the conservatory student she had once been, to the hotel cleaner she had become, to the composer and pianist she was now. All these versions of herself existed together in this moment, in this music. The applause began before she lifted her hands from the piano. As it swelled, Elena rose and turned to face the audience. They were on their feet, just as they had been a year ago at her debut. But this time Elena wasn't shocked or overwhelmed. This time, she belonged here. She took her bow, accepting the applause not just for herself, but for everyone who had helped her along the way, her daughter, who had never lost faith, Victor, who had seen her potential when she was invisible to everyone else, her teachers at the conservatory, the foundation that had supported her return to music, and she accepted it for the Elena who had cleaned hotel rooms for 20 years without complaint, who had raised a daughter alone, who had kept a spark of music alive in her heart even when there was no piano to play. As she walked off stage to prepare for her encore, Elena felt a sense of peace unlike anything she had known before. She had once believed that life only offered one path, that choices once made could never be unmade. Now she understood that some doors never truly close. They simply wait for the right moment to be opened again. And sometimes all it takes is the courage to sit down at a piano when someone dares you to play.